Germans are coming in hot with a $40 million show, but man, I think it was worth it. Hey guys, it's G from the F Word here to review Babylon Berlin. Now, Babylon Berlin is not a Netflix original series like Dark was. This was produced by another company called X Film Creative Pool. They also have a bunch of co-producers. R. DeGhetto, I believe the other one was Beta Film and Sky. Those are other co-producers of this. So they're the ones that created this in Germany, and Netflix brought it and said, hey, let's give it to everybody else. And I'm glad they did. So, a little bit of backstory before I get into the actual story of what this is. This is actually based on a novel of the same name, and it's set in a very interesting period of Germany. Now, we all think of Germany way back when, the Nazi era, and then that's it. There's a thing called causality that comes about, and this is very much about causality. Now, in 1918, World War I ended. 1919, all parties involved, the British, the French, the Italians, the Russian, and the Germans, reluctantly signed a thing called the Treaty of Versailles. Pretty much saying, okay, we're done fighting, this is our treaty, it's a treaty of peace, right? And we're going to keep this going so we don't have another war. And so Berlin's in a weird spot right now. It's now setting in the show, it's 1929, in a period called the Weimer-era. And in the Weimer-era, it's very much like we've seen in other shows in America and even in London and all that stuff. They did have a period of like kind of a Great Gatsby-ish type of 1920s era where there were clubs and partying and, all sorts of things going on. But what was actually happening is that Germany was gearing towards something that no one saw coming. Even parties that were involved in the execution of what would inevitably happen in 1933 when Hitler ended up becoming the chancellor, and, the world saw one of the most horrific events ever, with one of the most evil men ever, and one of the most extreme forms of power in Nazis. You kind of see what's going to happen here. However, like I said, there was something that happened. There are things that happen on the ground level. There were people involved. There were things going on that led to something like this. These things just don't happen. And this is very telling in what's going on today. Believe it or not, the world is at a weird point where something's gonna break and everything's kind of boil over eventually. This is kind of showing us a series of events through this wonderful noir detective story of those events in a very intricate and very interesting way. So it starts off with the train. And this train is hijacked by a group called the Red Fortress, led by their leader, Kardagov, and his girlfriend, Svetlana. And this group is trying to take down Stalin and bring up Trotsky. There's a lot of wagons in here that you'll end up finding out that play a big role in things to come and how that causes a lot of the actions later on by many people of influence. And how those people of influence could take things to that next level, which led us to the inevitability of 1933. Now, there's a lot of other historical details in this, but I do want to get into the show so that it doesn't run too long. We are then introduced to our main character, Gerion Rath, who is a war veteran, becomes a policeman. He goes to Berlin, joins the Vice Squad there because he's been tasked to find some pretty damning evidence on some influential people before the elections are supposed to go down that could pretty much topple that figure's position, like most of these things do. And what starts off as busting a porn ring ends up becoming this rabbit hole that he eventually ends up going into, uncovering more and more things. He's got his partner. His name's Bruno Wolf. He is not the nicest guy in the world. You kind of like him. You kind of don't like him. You don't know how you feel about them, but that's okay because he doesn't know how he feels about Gerion because he keeps a lot of things close to the vest. Gerion also has a condition of like a lot of anxiety. He shakes a lot and he has to take this medicine. So he is a vulnerable character and he kind of keeps, again, a lot of things to himself to keep his cool. And this Bruno guy doesn't like it because he doesn't know what this guy's deal is. And really, nobody does. So there is kind of that resentment there. However, they still have each other's backs because it's part of the job and they respect the job. On the other side, we are then introduced to the wonderful Charlotte Ritter. She is a very, very poor girl living in a small little flat with her family, her piece of shit brother-in-law, her dying mom, and her dying granddad, all trying to keep things together and gain money because they are extremely poor, and you see that in this. And she represents the very, very bottom class. Now, by day, she runs to the police headquarters and fights for a job as an administrator because they literally pick from the girls that are there. And by night, she's a prostitute. But she is a lot more than just this person that, gets these two jobs. She's a very intelligent person. And that plays a lot because she's a survivor and she knows how to deal with people and how to survive. And she's extremely intelligent and very curious as well, but she knows how to handle herself in a lot of different situations. Eventually, Garyon and Charlotte cross paths. I mean, they're in a police station. That's going to happen. And we got some other characters that are involved in there as well. And what ends up happening is we get, like I said, this detective story about uncovering a lot of what's going on in the underbelly of Berlin. And there is a hell of a lot more to this. We're talking, we got underground groups, we got that Red Fortress group, that we've got Russian communists, we've got police creating propaganda off absolutely nothing, we've got civil unrest. What I don't want to spoil, obviously, is what happens really in the story, because there is a lot. There's 16 episodes, 46 minutes each. It's a lot to unpack here. So let's get right into it. Right away, I liked this show a lot. It was very cool. It had a really good style. That $40 million is shown in this thing. From the costume design, production design, to the locations that they were at, to the way that it was shot, to the amount of talent and extras and how alive Berlin felt in a lot of the scenes that were going on. There's a lot of really good stuff here. The writing was really intriguing and really good, and it took you on this really cool journey that didn't hold your hand the whole time, which is fine. It allowed me to think about things the way I wanted to think about them. And the other really important thing that it did is that it didn't allow itself to really be biased in one way or another. Let me make that decision. That's what I got out of it. Now, you might get something different, but that's what I got, which I thought was really cool and really important to a story like this that has huge implications, and you kind of know where things end up. But we get to see things from the ground floor, which is very cool. And unless you've read this book or checked up on history, you don't know much about. So they did a really good job of that. The editing was good. The fact that it was 16 episodes, I was worried that it was going to end up really boring me and I was going to be waiting for the next episode to go on. But somehow, some way, it did a good job of keeping me intrigued every episode in such a way that it made sense. There wasn't anything that was just thrown in there for filler, at least not a lot of stuff that was in there just for filler. All of it gave in to giving us more character backstory, more intrigue, more underground happenings that we could piece together in our minds and being like, oh, okay, I see how this might have started this, which led to this, which led to this. So a lot of that stuff was done really well and it was executed in a very smart way. Garyon was a character that I liked because he had vulnerability to him, not just because of his anxiety, but he also had some type of a personality. He deals with a lot of stuff that you find out in the show, but the number one is Charlotte. I loved the character of Charlotte. She was by far my favorite. It was just great watching her work. The actress that played her did her with such grace and such poise and such confidence, with just a little bit of cheekiness that you appreciate and you like. And she was just all around great. I liked her a lot. But there were a lot of really good extra characters. The other people that they introduced, you felt for, you cared for. It made sense to why they were there. Some of the negatives. I don't have too many, not gonna lie. Again, I thought this was gonna be a really long-winded, and yeah, there were a couple times that the story got a little bit convoluted. That could have been just a way to add more time to it, but it eventually got to where it needed to go. Maybe some things, like I mentioned in the positives, that yeah, most characters that were brought in had some meaning. Some of them were brought in, really just helped us get from A to B in that specific episode for a short period of time. They maybe put a little bit more weight onto them than we thought, and it ultimately didn't mean anything. And then the only thing I can think of that would really be considered a negative was that there were some characters I forgot about. Again, it's long. When you factor in that much time, you do lose track of certain characters. And when the show gets a little bit convoluted and it kind of gets a little bit messy, more so towards like the third or fourth last episode, but for a very short while, and it's able to bring itself back so it doesn't lose track for a very long time, which is very important because a lot of shows do that. But some characters I did kind of lose track of. I was kind of wondering, well, am I going to see them again? It seems like the people that were introduced early on, we just kind of lose them for a bit. And you're just kind of wondering where they are. And then eventually they come back, when sometimes you kind of wish, well, I wish they would have peppered them in. Maybe just a scene here or there. However, there were bigger things to deal with too. So, Babylon Berlin. It's extremely interesting, and they weave this wonderful story in the history that's there. Obviously, they do things for the sake of a show. However, it does make sense given that time period and given what was to come. The political and civil conflicts that were going on and the climate at that time ultimately led to the era of Hitler. Almost inevitably, something was about to happen. Germany in general was in a very weird spot. To the Germans, at least shown to us in this show, there's a sense that they didn't want to sign that treaty. They just kind of did. And again, that pot boiling over eventually. These little bits that are in here really speak to a lot of stuff that's happening in our time right now. And if you pay attention to those little details and how, like I mentioned, causality plays a big role, you'll really appreciate this even more so for that fact alone. I hope you guys get a chance to see this. Let me know if you have. And when you do, I would love to hear your thoughts on Babylon Berlin. I really, really liked it. And it is 100% worth your time. That's my review. A little bit long, but again, it's a longer show. So again, like I said, leave your comments below on Babylon Berlin. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button for more content. I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on Twitter at the FWordsG. You can email us at the FWordPodcast@gmail.com. Make sure you're following Entertain Facts on Instagram. And until next time, I'm G, and I am out.